I want to talk to you about something you already know, not theory, not the careful language of people who study dysfunction from a safe distance and publish their findings in journals nobody reads. Something you have lived in your body. Something you felt on a Monday morning when you walked through a door you did not want to walk through, sat down inside a system you did not build, and watched again as the thing that was supposed to work did not work, because the people responsible for it had already decided, without a meeting, without a vote, without a single word spoken out loud, that it was someone else's problem. I am not describing a bad day. I am describing a condition. I call it gross incompetence. And before I go any further, I want to be precise about what I mean, because this thing survives specifically by remaining unnamed. And naming it precisely is the first act of resistance available to anyone trapped inside it. Incompetence is one person failing. Gross incompetence is the system failing at the level of its own design, while everyone inside it maintains the performance of function. It is the rot that has learned to present itself as policy. It is the haunted house that has convinced its residents the smell in the walls is just the building settling. It comes in three forms. All three are running right now in institutions you can name. All three have been running since the first human beings organized themselves into groups and immediately began negotiating about whose job it was to do the thing none of them wanted to do. The first form is the leave it for the other guy. Multiple people failing to do their jobs because each of them has made the silent, private, never announced collective decision that it belongs to someone else. No accountability, no ownership, no single face to point to when the thing collapses because everyone's fingerprints are on it and therefore no one's are. This is not incompetence. This is coordinated abdication without coordination, the most efficient form of collective failure human beings have ever produced because it requires no planning, no communication, and no acknowledgement that it is happening. The gothic horror of it is not the monster with a face. It is the decay with no source, the rot that spread through the walls while everyone was watching everyone else to see who would move first. Nobody moved. The wall fell. And the cosmic scale of it, the part that should stop you cold, is that this is not one office or one company or one bad quarter. This is the operating system of institutional failure running simultaneously in every sector, every country, every century that has produced organizations capable of failing. Rome did not fall because of the barbarians. Rome fell because the people inside the institution had spent 2 centuries leaving it for the other guy, and one day there was no other guy, and the barbarians walked through a door that should have been guarded and found it unguarded, and that was that. Every philosopher who has ever looked at this has reached the same conclusion through different language. The Platonist says the form of the institution, what it was actually built to be, who it was built to serve, is still up there in the light somewhere. What we are living inside is the shadow of it. The people casting the shadows have long since forgotten anything else exists. The Stoic says your individual refusal to participate is the only thing within your control, and that refusal is necessary, and it is not sufficient. Marcus Aurelius refused to participate in the decay of Rome. Rome decayed anyway, because individual virtue inside a structurally corrupt system does not fix the structure. The Kantian says universalize the principle. If everyone leaves it for the other guy, there is no other guy, which means the maxim collapses on first contact with logic, and the entire operating culture of the institution is a logical impossibility wearing a badge. The psychologist says every individual participant in this collective failure has constructed a private narrative in which their non-participation is justified. Someone else is responsible. The system is broken. This is how it works here. Each narrative is a small identity protection mechanism. The sociologist says this is the bystander effect at institutional scale, diffusion of responsibility so complete that the original purpose of the institution has become invisible from the operational level. The economist says it is the principal agent problem metastasized. The agents have optimized for their own comfort, and the principal's mission is bleeding out on the floor of every leave it for the other guy meeting that has ever been held. The institutional shadow, Jung's term for the disowned self projected outward, is the work nobody claims, the report nobody writes, the problem nobody files, the call nobody returns, the shadow given a budget line, a parking space, a performance review, and a coffee mug with the logo. The second form is where it gets personal, political, ancient. The unqualified person in the seat they did not earn, nepotism, favoritism. The invisible arrangement between people who have always moved in the same circles and intend to keep moving in them, operating inside institutions that publicly describe themselves as meritocracies with a confidence that would be impressive if it were not so damaging. This is not a modern problem. This is the oldest institutional disease in recorded history. Every civilization that has declined, Rome, the Ottoman Empire, the Qing dynasty, the Bourbon monarchy, has listed patrimonialism as a primary mechanism of collapse. The wrong people in the seats of authority, loyalty substituting for competence, the facade of merit maintained while the actual operating principle is relationship. The pattern is so consistent across civilizations, so different from each other in every other respect, that it is not a cultural observation. It is a law of institutional physics. The wrong priest is in the temple. The wrong general is commanding the army. The wrong executive is running the division. The wrong manager is directing the work. And they are doing it with the full, untroubled confidence of someone who has never once been required to ask whether they belong where they are sitting, because the system that placed them there has never made the question available to them, and the people who could ask it have already calculated what asking would cost. Here is what it actually costs. Every decision made from inadequate understanding, every problem misdiagnosed because the person diagnosing it does not have the foundation the diagnosis requires. Every opportunity missed because the person in the seat cannot recognize it as an opportunity. Every person downstream whose work is harder, slower, more costly, and less effective because they are absorbing the compounding deficit of someone operating beyond their actual capacity in a role they were handed rather than earned. The economist calls this human capital misallocation. The historian calls it civilizational decline. The person sitting downstream of it on a Tuesday afternoon, redoing work that should not need to be redone, calls it something shorter. The sociological damage extends beyond the individual misallocation. Every person who watched the unqualified appointment received a message about what the institution actually rewards, and that message restructured their relationship to the work in ways that are difficult to reverse. The institution lost not just the productivity differential, it lost the trust of everyone who witnessed the transaction and updated their model of how the system actually operates. That update is rarely reversed. People remember what they saw. They adjust accordingly. The adjustment costs the institution more than the original appointment, compounding over the entire tenure of everyone who was present. The Gothic horror of the unqualified person in the seat of authority is its familiarity. You have seen this face. You recognized it the moment you saw it across the table. You felt the wrongness of it in your chest before your mind had finished processing what your instincts already knew. The cosmic horror is its age. This face has been sitting in that seat since the first hierarchy, in every culture, on every continent, in every century. It is not going to stop sitting there because you are frustrated by it. It is going to stop sitting there only when the cost of placing it there becomes higher than the cost of placing the right person there. That calculation changes when enough people name what they are seeing precisely enough and loudly enough that the performance of meritocracy becomes more expensive than the practice of it. The third form is the one with the darkest humor, the humor that is only available when watching something entirely preventable become entirely catastrophic in slow motion, on a timeline that anyone paying attention could have written out in advance with specific dates and specific mechanisms. Penny smart, dollar foolish. The decision to spend less on the thing that prevents the crisis, followed by the crisis, followed by the genuine bewilderment of people who made the decision and do not understand why the crisis arrived. The Challenger O-rings, the Deepwater Horizon blowout preventer, the 2008 risk models, the water pipe in every city that has failed after years of documented requests for replacement that were denied on budget grounds, the training program that was cut, the inspection that was skipped, the maintenance cycle extended 1 quarter, and then another until the extension was the standard, and the standard was the infrastructure, and the infrastructure was the disaster. In every single case, the inquiry that followed the catastrophe produced findings that multiple people inside the institution had already documented in reports that nobody with the authority to act on them had read. The warnings existed. The math existed. The timeline existed. The decision to defer existed. The catastrophe existed on schedule. The bewilderment was not honest. It was performed. Because honest bewilderment requires genuine surprise, and genuine surprise requires not having read the reports, and not having read the reports is itself the condition being described. The economist calls this hyperbolic discounting, the systematic tendency to overweight present savings and underweight future costs, producing decisions that are locally rational and temporally catastrophic. The political scientist calls it misaligned time horizons. The budget cycle is annual, the consequence cycle is decadal, and the person making the budget decision will not be in the seat when the consequence arrives, which means the incentive structure actively rewards the decision that will eventually destroy the institution. The sociologist calls it organizational mortality denial, the institution's refusal to acknowledge its own finitude producing decisions that accelerate the very ending being denied. The psychologist calls it Becker's death terror applied to institutional life, the budget cut as the assertion that we can have the outcome without paying the cost of the mechanism, that we can remain the thing without doing the ongoing work of remaining the thing. The Gothic horror of penny smart, dollar foolish is the quality of its timeline. The decay is always slow enough to be deniable until the moment it is not. That moment arrives without warning in the sense that the specific day cannot be predicted. It does not arrive without warning in the sense that everyone who understood the mechanism knew it was coming and said so and was not listened to. The pipe fails on a Wednesday. The O-ring fails on a cold morning in January. The financial system fails in September. The day is a surprise. The failure is not, now stop. Before the closing. The human cost, not the institutional cost, not the economic cost. The cost paid by actual people in the currency of actual years. The person who did their job while the people around them did not and absorbed the consequences of that abdication without recognition, without remedy, and without the institution ever acknowledging that the abdication had occurred. The person passed over for someone who knew the right person, who processed that alone because saying it out loud was accurately assessed as more costly than staying silent. The person who watched the thing they had been warning about for 2 years fail exactly the way they said it would fail, and sat in the inquiry, and said nothing, because the institution had already demonstrated what it did to people who said the necessary thing at the necessary moment. These are not abstract figures. These are people you know. These are possibly you. That cost is real. It is paid in years of a life that were harder than they needed to be, because gross incompetence was operating above and around and directly upon the person paying the bill, and the bill was never acknowledged, and the person paying it was expected to absorb it without complaint and perform enthusiasm for the institution that was charging it. That deserves to be named before anything closes. Here is where every discipline converges on the same conclusion. The philosopher, the sociologist, the psychologist, the political scientist, the economist, and the historian all put their hands on the same animal in the dark and feel the same thing. Gross incompetence in all three forms is a failure of accountability at the level of the soul, not the system, the soul. The leave for the other guy is a soul that decided its comfort is worth more than its function. The nepotistic appointment is a soul that decided its relationships are worth more than its integrity. The penny smart dollar foolish calculation is a soul that decided its present ease is worth more than its future survival and everyone else's present safety. Three different expressions of the same choice across three different domains. Self over work, comfort over cost, appearance over reality, the short term over everything that matters in the long term. The medicine in the candy, the reason this is being delivered in the language of institutional decay and civilizational collapse and Gothic rot, rather than the language of a leadership seminar, is this. You already knew all of it. You have been watching all three forms operate around you and above you, and at your expense for as long as you have been inside institutions. What I have done here is not reveal anything. I have named what you already felt with enough precision that the performance of uncertainty, the institutional reflex that trains you to doubt what you are directly observing, to soften your description of it, to qualify it into harmlessness, has nowhere left to go. The thing you are seeing is the thing you are seeing. The emperor is not wearing clothes. The pipe has not been replaced. The unqualified person is in the seat. The other guy has been waiting for you to do the thing since before you arrived. The savings became the disaster on the schedule the warnings predicted. History documented it. Philosophy named it. Sociology mapped it. Psychology explained it. Political science traced it across every civilization that tried and failed to contain it. Economics calculated what it costs. Every discipline that has ever studied human organizational behavior has arrived at the same conclusion your instincts reached before you finished your coffee on Monday morning. This is what it is. This is what it has always been. It will continue to be this until enough people name it precisely, consistently, and loudly enough that the cost of the naming becomes lower than the cost of the condition. Name it when you see it. Name it without apology. Name it without the hedging language designed to protect the institution from accurate description of its own condition. You are not being difficult. You are being honest. And honesty applied without permission is the only force that has ever moved an institution 1 inch in the direction it needs to go. Question everything. Zerga.